How's it going, Jack Tackers, and welcome back to another video for you guys. Today, I'm going to be doing my review for Barry Season 4, Episode 6, which was titled The Wizard. And overall, yes, another fantastic, brilliant episode. I loved this one. It was a good continuation of what we saw in the last episode, of course, with this 8-year time skip. But now we are getting reintroduced to our characters, such as NoHo Hank, and of course, Fuchs. And it was just really great to see them again, because, I didn't know. If you guys saw my review last week, actually, I said I wouldn't be surprised if we never saw Hank or Fuchs again, because low-key, their stories were over, but apparently they aren't over. But who knows? I kind of just assumed Fuchs was in prison and NoHo Hank lost Cristobal. That was the end of their stories. Maybe not, of course. In this episode, we realize that isn't the case, and I'm glad. It would have been kind of sad if we never saw these characters again, because they're just such major characters and integral to the show. So yeah, very glad we got to see him again. And Fuchs is out of prison now, so he was only in there for 8 years. I don't exactly know what his sentence was, and I don't exactly know if he maybe took a deal of some kind or how it all worked out. But yeah, I guess he was only in there for 8 years, but he comes out a changed man for sure. I mean, for the most part. I mean, his morals are still very rocky, and it looks like he wants to kill Barry, which is kind of interesting. And basically he meets up with Hank and wants to work with him. And that was pretty interesting. NoHo Hank actually has this new company called NoHo Ball, which is just amazing. Obviously, the ship name between NoHo Hank and Cristobal. I just loved that little moment. You see the sign in front of the building that said NoHo Ball. It was just awesome. I love that moment. But Hank's very much in denial of him having any part in Cristobal's death, as we see towards the end of this episode when Fuchs is at his house. And by the way, I love that moment in this episode when Fuchs picks up that woman at Coffee Bean, and somehow he just gets with that woman, and then that woman invites her daughter over to Hank's house and they all have dinner. What? But yeah, at that dinner, Hank starts freaking out when Fuchs tells him that he's a badass for getting rid of Cristobal and all that. And yeah, Hank's just kind of in denial right now. He believes, no, it was our rivals who killed Cristobal. He didn't have anything to do with it. It's I don't know, NoHo Hank, whatever you say, buddy. But yeah, you definitely did this. And Cristobal's dead because of you. I hate to say it, but it is what it is. And NoHo Hank's a bit of a psychopath. Actually, he is a psychopath, but a likable psychopath? I don't know. But yeah, very interesting to see the two working together, although I don't know if they'll be continuing to work together in the next episode because, yeah, NoHo wanted him out, Fuchs out of his house. So very just interesting stuff there, and I'm very intrigued to see what happens with that whole plot line. But in this episode, we also got to see Barry going to L.A. to kill Gene, or at least he wants to kill Gene. And throughout the entire episode, he's listening to podcasts while he's in LA, trying to convince himself that killing isn't necessarily a sin, because he's got this religion kind of mindset right now, and he wants to, kind of implement that into his life as much as possible. So he listens to these podcasts, which, by the way, one of the podcasts he's listening to, one of the voices is Bill Burr, which is just awesome. I was like, oh, that's Bill Burr's voice. I could just tell. Very funny. And it's just oh, murder isn't a sin, or some bullshit like that. It was certain things the podcast was saying. It was just hilarious. But yeah, I loved that moment, and it was just a very comedic moment when he's just driving in the car and listening to Bill Burr. But yeah, at the end of the episode, though, he goes to Gene's house. And by the way, we also find Gene's son is alive, Leo. He's alive, actually. He wasn't shot fatally. And we didn't get that answer in last week's episode, of course, because it was just focused on Barry and Sally. And we'll talk about Sally in a minute. But, it was just a good relief to see that Leo's okay. And it looks like Leo's actually, good with his dad right now. At least, he wants to, he invited him in his house, and it seems like Leo actually wants, Gene to kind of be a part of his life a little bit. And it seems that Gene doesn't want to actually have this Barry biopic, this movie be made, which is kind of interesting. I think last week's episode, it made it seem like he wanted it to be made, but I don't think that's the case, actually. And Barry, I don't think, realizes that Gene actually wants the movie to be canned. Gene doesn't want the movie to be made, and his son doesn't believe him at first, but yeah, Gene, makes it apparent that he doesn't want the movie to be made. For various reasons, of course. But Barry doesn't realize this. He ends up going to Gene's house, and it's oh no, what's going to happen? But then as he's walking up the steps, a bag goes over Barry's head. And it's like, immediately I kind of suspected it was Jim Moss. Like, immediately I kind of suspected it was him. And I'm like, oh, dude. And luckily the episode didn't end like immediately after the bag went over his head. It ended, of course, with Barry being strapped to a chair and in front of Jim in his garage. And we just know some bad stuff goes down in Jim's garage. It's going to be intense to see what happens next week with Barry. And I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if Barry, like, dies in next week's episode. I know that's kind of weird to say. It's the penultimate episode. There's only 2 episodes left, but, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Hader does something crazy in the writer's room and flat out just decides that Barry dies in episode 7 instead of the finale, and we just kind of see the aftermath in episode 8. That would be crazy, but like, it's Barry. I feel like anything's possible in this show, especially because it's the final season and we have 2 episodes left. Like, who knows? Barry could die next week. I'm not even kidding. Like, I feel like he could. That might be stupid. Some people might think, no, he'll get out of this situation somehow. But like, I can't say for certain at this point, which is great. I love this show because it's so unpredictable. But yeah, it's just really interesting to see what happens with that whole storyline. And then we have this like home invasion thing going on with Sally. She's left with John at the house. And I thought the guy that she kind of like strangled in the bathroom in last week's episode showed up. At least I thought that was his voice at first. But then like, it's like this weird, by the way, this whole scene where that guy in the black like mask and the black clothing was in the house and Sally like didn't see him. It was very like filmed like a horror movie, to be honest. It was very horrific and scary. And I was just like blown away by that whole sequence where like the house is getting rammed by the truck or whatever. And it was kind of confusing because in that scene, you don't exactly know what's real or what's imaginary. And yeah, apparently it was real because you see the aftermath of all the stuff in the house kind of like, messed up and all the tables flipped over. John's drunk. Sally is a bad mom. I hate to say it, but she's a bad mom. Gave her son alcohol and he's like drunk on the couch sleeping. And yeah, it was like some sort of home invasion. And I heard somewhere on Twitter like that moment where Sally's in her bedroom and you hear the guy talking like, did you just poke my eye? That was some of the dialogue of the guy she killed, stabbed in season 3. So it's like a weird blend of reality and like hallucination, almost dream sequence. But it was a brilliant scene. I loved that scene and one of the highlights of the episode for sure. A lot of good things about this episode though. But yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know exactly who that guy was. Was the guy even real? Was he actually wearing like a black mask and all that? Or was it like some... Does this have anything to do with the guy who knocked on the door last week? Or was that just like at first, I thought it was just a silly like, ding dong ditcher. I just thought it was like stupid kids ding dong ditching or whatever. At least that's what I took away from the scene last week. Is this correlated with it though? Like, I don't exactly know what's happening, but like, it's possible. And then I thought it was the guy from last week that she strangled. Like, I don't know. It's like, again, a weird blend of reality and hallucination of some kind, but all very intriguing. The show switches from comedy to drama to horror very interestingly. And I just love the show because of it. But that's just kind of my brief thoughts on the episode. I loved it, of course. I thought it was fantastic, and I'm so excited to see what happens next. But yeah, let me hear your thoughts on the episode down in the comments below. What do you guys have to say about it? Let me hear all that down in the comments. And if you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. Check out my Letterboxd and Twitter in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.